No, as a business, you're dead if you don't adapt to the climate issue. If you look at the younger generation today, it's unthinkable for most of them to work for a company that doesn't work very hard on these issues.
Mayday. Or maybe rowing.
Yeah.
What about the shining in the boat?
Yeah.
What boat?
We are arriving in Stockholm.
So you don't need to like talk to the camera.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, you can if it feels like it makes sense, but it can come off as like pretty intense if you're just like telling things to the camera. So maybe just use that for dramatic effect.
Yes, I'm Daniel. I'm CEO of MAG Interactive. So it was a game in Sweden that was called Word Feud, which was kind of a Words with Friends Nordic version made by a single developer in Norway, I think. That just completely took over the mobile market in Sweden in 2011. Right, and then was like, oh, this simple game and everyone loves it. Maybe we can actually do this even though we haven't made games before. What can we do with just 4 guys and no experience from this industry? Just look at the App Store and see, okay, do we find a hole somewhere? And word games, like Zynga was obviously out there with Words with Friends, an incredibly well-made game, but not caring about our small European languages. So like, okay, a localized word game, that's at least in 2012 was still fairly blue ocean or whatever. So we made the first game in a couple of months and then it just worked. So I guess that's why we're here.
Okay, and
took 3 weeks to 1 million downloads without marketing, those days.
That might be harder today.
We bootstrapped this company and we've been profitable basically since we started. So we built on what we earned, basically.
Cool.
But growing from just a few people around a desk to kind of a more real company, that's been a journey, like doing some things right, some things wrong, and kind of recalibrating. Right now we're slightly more than 100. I mean, we meet everyone twice a year, but you don't want to fly everyone back and forth. It doesn't feel very modern. So we try to like be as cautious as we can in terms of moving people around with airplanes. And that also means it's the Brighton folks that go to Stockholm rather than the other way around, because 20 people or 80 people moving. I think when we started out, we felt like that was a weakness that you're not part of the games industry to start with. But like the more I think about it now, I think it's been a strength coming with no prejudice into what games should be. And we make very casual games, so we're, in that sense, at least I'm more close to our audience than maybe I would be if I grew up being a part of the kind of core game industry.
Fair enough.
Now I'd say a huge chunk of everyone who works here are these typical game industry folks that have been at DICE or other games companies in Stockholm. And also the mobile game scene have grown up here over the last 10 years. We have King, we have Rovio Stockholm office, and we have us, which I think are the 3 biggest mobile games companies here. But of course, like a few years ago when I went to Helsinki, you feel a bit of envy, like there's like this dynamics, tons of companies and a lot of exciting things going on. I don't feel the Stockholm scene has been that dynamic in mobile. No one's really taken the lead on like having conferences and doing stuff. I mean, King has not been to Stockholm what Supercell's been to Helsinki, for example.
Every time we talk about the Finnish game scene, like every single person, both outside of Finland and inside Finland, is saying the same thing, that it's this like mega collaborative, environment, and it's this very much this like we're never competing with each other. We're just competing with for the big markets with everybody else in the world. Do you feel that like that attitude is somehow missing in Stockholm, or it's not being fostered as much, or where do you think the kind of difference comes from?
At least me, and I think most people work here, want to view the world that way. Where I've always encouraged, like, be super transparent, share as much as you can, you're gonna get a lot of stuff back. But maybe it's been like we had this giant company, King, and then everyone else, and not too many small mobile games companies that are kind of successful, that can share things that are relevant. I've been a lot of times to Helsinki, and it feels more sharing and lively in that sense. But I mean, it also takes a lot of energy to do that. So at some level of success, maybe you feel that you can afford to have your own big conference and invite people from all over the world to come there and collaborate like Supercell's done.
Yeah, exactly, with Games First.
Yeah, exactly. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So I'd love for us to be there at some point.
Maybe we can start having game developer conferences on these ferries.
Yeah, oh, that's gonna be not great.
When I started more than 20 years ago, we had weekly IGDA chapter meetings. So every Tuesday, all the game devs would meet up in a bar, get drunk together, and talk about what they're working on.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is like a special Finnish or Helsinki thing. I think we just got lucky that we had a handful of people really early on who just wanted to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's simple as that, because then it created this community sense in all the companies, that it's just like when you join the industry, there's already like these gatherings, so then you just keep doing it without questioning it. And if that wasn't happening, then that's that. It just won't happen.
No, because it doesn't feel at me as kind of prototypical Finnish to be super social
so
and
that's
just
the thing,
do stuff together. Like you're supposed to be quiet, sit at home drinking.
And don't ever tell anyone what you're
Exactly.
working on. Like, but that's really the thing. Like, it really isn't like in the DNA or in the cultural DNA at all. So I think it's really just luck that we had like a handful of people who just wanted to do that. Are the PC console companies and the mobile companies, are they kind of in separate spheres, or is there overlap, cross-pollination now?
It feels pretty separate to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I've met up with a bunch of guys from the other companies, obviously. Actually had a few of the PC console folks coming here for a session, just learning about how to think about mobile and mobile marketing and measurement of like digital entertainment. Like mobile games is like so far ahead on the curve on that,
absolutely,
compared to more old school game making.
What are the kind of big trends, opportunities, or obstacles that you guys are taking seriously at the moment?
I think, of course, marketing is a huge part of mobile games. And I see us as partly winners in this kind of rearrangement of how you find users.
Cool.
In the sense that I think hyper casual might suffer a lot from kind of advertising ecosystem being shaken up a bit. And obviously like mid-core and strategy games and casinos and what have you have a real hard time finding these whale type spenders.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I think you're seeing more of the hardcore games trying to come across as more casual, to have a broader funnel in, and also being able to adapt to more casual style gamers. They will need to be able to do that. But I think having a broad potential audience is probably good when targeting becomes less effective. So I think we'll see a trend where everyone comes closer to where we are. It's going to be hard to build mid-core games when marketing is very imprecise.
Yeah.
How do you reach that narrow audience? Not with performance marketing in the same sense you did a number of years ago. Maybe you can go for like people who are interested in X, but you're gonna you run out of that audience pretty quickly. When you run user acquisition, then you need to kind of find other kind of behavior patterns. So small niches, I think, is going to be very, very hard. If I would advise anyone, it would not be to build very niche experiences in a world where targeting becomes harder. I'd say more go for building adaptive games in the sense that if people come in, you can serve them with slightly different experiences depending on the behavior they show in the product.
Right.
Because you're not going to know exactly who's going to come in from that campaign, because it's like the attribution is really much weaker.
I think that's what the 2.5 Gamers guys, so Matej, Felix, and Jakub, that's what they were saying, that they're seeing companies now build games that have like 3 separate kind of core mechanisms, and that's just how it's going to be, and that might be even growing further in the future.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay, interesting. But I mean, in the end, like you guys make free-to-play mobile games, so I'm sure the whole CAC versus LTV kind of math is very deep in there in the company's DNA. So how have you seen that the kind of UA landscape concretely change in the past, whatever, half a year, or expected to change further in the next year when Google starts turning on all their stuff?
We kind of braced for impact when, okay, ATT is rolling out here. And what happened to us, say, starting April, May last year, all of a sudden we couldn't spend much more on UA. Like, it's been the last 9 months, probably been the best in terms of UA spend for us in the last 4 years.
Cool. Okay.
Which is very surprising.
Yeah.
So we talk about that a lot. Maybe there's less competition in our space for a bit, and then it works despite ATT changing, that some budgets are just removed from the market because they can't find return on ad spend when the targeting is weaker, and that opens a window for someone who can have a broader approach to marketing. So maybe we didn't benefit as much from very precise marketing a year ago.
Yeah, recession times or whatever this is that we're going through economically, that brand dollars always pull out. So the big kind of like broad appeal consumer brands pull out of the market, and I mean, it sounds like for you this could be the best thing ever because like the inventory is still there, but now you're not competing with like Coke.
What I hope is that Facebook, for example, get their stuff together and start working again. They've been just a complete mess, in my view, the last year. It just doesn't work for them. So hopefully they can make something that starts to work better again. That's going to be helpful. But I mean, as you said, Google is moving in the same direction with kind of try to make all users more anonymous in a sense. Comforting thing there is that they are actually an advertising company compared to Apple, who's they just pulled the rug. Google is going to make sure this works, and like they've been very public with that as well. Like we're going to roll things out, work with the industry to make sure this doesn't just break everything. But still, of course, we should work with kind of integrity of users. I think that's in everyone's interest.
It's a good, healthy development, but that indeed the Google approach is probably a little bit friendlier to the industry. That it's just like.
And I mean, and obviously, like Apple has its own ad network where they know everything. So you're also kind of not honest with the end users. They don't understand the difference.
I hope they get more criticism for that. Because that's really that's what it actually feels like. It's just a competitive move and a really aggressive one.
I think they hate Facebook, and this was a great gut punch. Many people who work here, including the founders, are very concerned about climate change, and we worked on this for several years. We're part of a group called Playing for the Planet, which is kind of UN initiative that we joined a few years ago as one of the first companies. So we've done that over a number of years now, running events like in the sense of reminding people that the reality is actually out there. There's been different topics about, I think the last one was about the oceans. And we've done these kind of tree planting initiatives, like you play part of the game, and then we will pay for planting trees, depending on how many things you collect of this and that, matching donations from players. And I think this is a small thing, but it's a signal, like both out to the players, we as a company care about this, maybe you should think about it. I think it's also internally, like employer branding and all those components as well. Like we're a company that actually cares about stuff that you care about as an individual working here. We also like look at our carbon impact in general over a year, so we kind of compensate for any emissions that we create by flying between our offices or the electricity that powers the servers. We also calculate the energy to charge people's phones, everyone playing our games, and compensate for that as well. So we try to be as kind of zero impact as we can in terms of climate footprint. Then there's always a debate, like, can you compensate? How do you do that? And so on. So we try to be very elaborate in how we find the right kind of investments to do with that money to compensate. I think there's stuff you can do that's not very expensive. It's not super complicated, but you feel that you're doing something. And since this is true to things we believe in, then you should do it. If we couldn't care less about the climate and did this just to strengthen our employer and brand, that would be both not very truthful, but also that would shine through quickly and would be very short lasting. So I think, but this feels like a real issue that we care about, and then I think it's good to show that. We could, of course, just spend money on creating energy in a cleaner way in India somewhere and not talk about it. But I think it adds value to actually talk about it. Yeah, and we have games that are well suited for that. Like our biggest product in terms of DAU is a trivia game. So it's really easy to play around with that, having different kind of topics where you can actually have questions around stuff that's concerning the climate. And we work together with, I think we work together with Greenpeace with some of these events and other organizations around climate change to kind of raise awareness.
You calculate your like emissions footprint to the point of considering people charging their phones to play your games. So can you talk a little bit because you said that it's not that complicated, but I think for a lot of companies that's very scary and it feels very messy. So how do you do that in practice?
I don't think you have to overcomplicate things. So if you know how many hours a day people are playing your game and in which countries, you can probably estimate the amount of energy needed to power those phones for that amount of time, and then there you go.
And I mean that's a fair point, because at least for EU countries, like there's publicly available data for the kind of grid mix of electricity, so you can actually see that if someone is playing in Poland for an hour, then you know what is the kind of emissions rate of Polish electricity. So I mean, I think it makes full sense what you're saying. I think people just like, it's a new thing, and of course it then always sounds scary. And what if we get it wrong, which is of course the wrong mindset. Because
exactly, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, exactly.
Not too bad, right?
Yeah, we planted too many trees.
And if you've been successful enough to have huge amount of people playing your game, you have solved way harder problems than that.
Yeah.
So just go figure it out.
So I'm actually gonna go forward today at the embassy because I'm fucking terrified of what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I don't know what's up with this field in general.
What about this horse?
Or this horse, I don't know what's up with this horse.
It looks AI generated.
What's up with why we are on this field with this horse? It's that Sunday is the election day in Finland. But given that I'm not in Finland, I need to vote remotely, so we are heading to the Finnish embassy, which is hopefully that way. Yeah.
Let's go.
Suomi. We're still in the weird wasteland, so I don't know why the Finnish embassy is at the corner of this wasteland. Feels offensive, but we probably picked it ourselves. Like, no, it's good. Reminds me of Finland, there's not too many neighbors. It's comfortable. Voted. That's it.
If you want to be extra dramatic, then you can talk straight to the camera. Otherwise, just talk to Maria.
And that is why we need to go to net zero
Exactly.
immediately.
Yeah.
So my name is David Olsson. I'm co-founder and chief operating officer of We Don't Have Time. We Don't Have Time is the ongoing climate meeting. So our mission is to have a constant digital presence, pushing the agenda for halving by 2030 and going net zero as fast as we can. The world leaders gather 2 weeks every year, which is good, of course, that they gather during what is called the COP meetings to discuss how to progress on the climate issue. But the other, 50 weeks on the calendar year, the issue is not going away and the emissions are not going away. So we need to address this issue 24/7, basically. And on our platform, we do that. So we have a community of 85,000 members, but it's an open platform. So we have nearly 200,000 users every month. And then we have a social media reach of nearly 200 million that we reach globally then through our users' activity that are active on the platform. And what they do is that they rate and review companies and send suggestions to companies and actors through our climate review system in which they give climate love or a climate warning. So that's a basic idea, that a community comes together and pushes this agenda on this platform. But then we also have actors themselves, and I'm talking about companies and NGOs that we collaborate with to push their climate solutions. In practice, it means that anyone can sign up, create an account, and start following other users and other organizations, just like you do on Facebook and Instagram. The content, though, is very different. Now let's take the example of the president of the US, Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy who's going to maybe make a pledge during a COP meeting about emission reduction. And for that, he'll receive climate love from our community. Now, if he instead goes on to expand a concession to mine, to extract oil on federal lands, he is going to receive a couple of climate warnings for that action. So he's a good example of someone who will be both rewarded and punished by a review system, basically. And that's how it should work. It's about rewarding the good stuff and speaking out on the bad stuff. Our goal is to drive and push the agenda so that we reach net zero as soon as possible and the world transitions to a fossil-free economy and societies. The business leader signs up because they should sign up because they too want this, and they have products that can make it happen. And individuals can sign up because they want it to happen and they want to learn and share information about how this can happen. We came from a position where we thought that, okay, so we're going to need this broad global movement in the digital space that pushes this agenda. So we need a lot of people signing up, and the people will go to the business people and tell them to, okay, you need to get your act together. What we've learned during our journey is that it's not so simple. It's only individuals on the one hand talking out to business leaders on the other. It's rather they have mutual common shared interests, these groups or these kinds of users on the platform. Business leaders too want to have a market for their solutions, and individuals want the solutions. So those who are really sitting on the fence are the policymakers and politicians, and they have the final say, of course, which is a bit sad given the situation that they're so slow.
How can the games industry and the company leaders, how can they organize themselves to make a change when it comes to politics?
The games industry reaches so many young people out there, so they actually have a great responsibility to tackle this issue seriously and work with their community to spread awareness. So the impact is really in terms of the climate dialogue that we can initiate. So okay, so I say impact. Okay, so people can criticize Joe Biden, and it's important to call leaders out when they not are fully committed to the climate cause. They fail. We are going. Our community is going to be there and have a lookout on them. Also, when the criticism is a bit off the mark, or there is something that a lot of people misunderstand, then if that can be corrected, or if you can have a nuanced discussion about it, that also then takes the issue forward and kind of creates the basis for more solutions to be created. Maybe a competing solution that doesn't have this problem, or correct the misunderstanding that was there somewhere.
What's your thoughts on the future and the interest in climate change?
Yeah.
Can you see like a trend? Would you say it's also like a business case or something? What do you like? What's
No,
your
as
opinion?
a business, you're dead if you don't adapt to the climate issue. If you look at the younger generation today, it's unthinkable for most of them to work for a company that doesn't work very hard on these issues and also show proven results. I think what we have now are a lot of pledges. So what we need to measure going forward is how well companies actually live up to those measures. And that is also something we're working on to develop with our platform. So if you're not in the game, you're out of the game. That's for sure.
So when are you Swedes going to learn to make proper games?
Exactly. In a decade now.
Bam. Done.
Say Stockholm.
Stockholm.